very back, and I was like having this wild panic attack, thinking, holy shit, how am I going to get up here? There are so many people, but then a bunch of people left, so it worked out. And I was kind of bummed because one of the poets mentioned pancakes, and I was going to talk about how I try to baby myself on days when I read. And I went to Sparty's this morning and had pancakes. And then the last poem she read, she had written 12 years ago, and the poem I'm going to read, I wrote 12 years ago, and I thought that was a really kind of a cool connection, but she left too. So. she was cool. So is there anybody here who remembers Magdalena's Tea House by any chance? So, so I love this place because it reminds me of Magdalena's quite a bit. But it has its own thing too. So this is a poem I wrote 12 years ago, and it really bums me out that it's still relevant, but I think it is, and this is for my daughter. Elegy for the United States of America. I pulled up and dropped you off, waved and drove away, late for work, the schoolyard empty, no group of friends for you to join, and turned around in a driveway less than 100 yards later, realizing that I hadn't seen you enter the building, hadn't seen you entering the safety of the hallways, couldn't see you entering the haven of a school, my hand already covering my mouth, eyes moist, the man emerging from the bushes, from the tree line, sprinting across an empty schoolyard in my mind, heading for you like a bullet as I turned in the driveway, you trudging toward the building with your backpack, lunchbox, violin, all 10 years. Me knowing as I backed out of the driveway, the tears wetting my fingers, covering my mouth, that this was completely irrational behavior, a ridiculous leap, a whole-blown widen logic, that the man could just as easily have been a woman, some woman crouching in the bushes for hours, waiting to drown my beautiful daughter in a bathtub with her lime green hat, purple coat, backpack, lunchbox, violin, all 10 years. But what I saw when I turned was a man sprinting across the empty schoolyard because I hadn't seen her enter the building, hadn't watched her into the building. The omission all the more painful because we'd been talking about the war, about the suicide bombers, and I thought to myself, naively perhaps, it is crazy that I have to explain to my 10-year-old daughter what a suicide bomber is, that I have to provide her with the definition for suicide bomber to stow within her backpack of words and ideas. And I realized as I passed by the schoolyard, too late to see her enter the safety of the building, that I had no idea who was in that building, who was hiding in that building, who was planning things in that building. That in some small yet deadly way, headlines are like hand grenades. That it was crazy that priests fondled young boys, that a woman who wanted a baby drove across the state and cut one out of another woman's stomach, that young men and women were blowing themselves up in cars rigged with bombs. And I told myself as I cried and turned around and drove back past the school that this was crazy, that everyone was mad, that the whole world was raving, and that I had to accept this because if I didn't, then I couldn't explain why I was driving past the school, why I was seething with irrational fear, why in the hitch of an instant between the flash and boom of a detonated bomb, I saw in my mind the man sprinting across the schoolyard, saw it with my own eyes, as plain as anything, saw him sprint across the path of my van, saw him running down the street, saw him emerge from the bushes, saw him sprinting across the schoolyard with my eyes, which immediately started to blur. And I wasn't sure if I was all shook up from the thought of this man attacking my daughter, from the thought of this sick phantom attacking my daughter, from the thought of men and women so angry and disturbed they destroy their own children, from the thought of limbs and lives being torn by bombs like business as usual. And of course the schoolyard was empty, and I wept off and on all the way to work, angry that I hadn't stopped, that I hadn't satisfied my crazy impulse. And turning off the van, I sighed and took off my glasses and wiped my face and thought, so be it. You are crazy. And I went into work and called the school and asked the secretary to let me speak with my daughter, and was transferred to a phone in her classroom and explained to the teacher that I was Jacqueline's father. And I could tell by the tone in the teacher's voice that she thought that this was odd, a little unordinary, but she quickly acquiesced. And my daughter said, hello. I said, hi, are you okay? And she said, yes. And I could tell by the question in her voice that she too wondered, that she would quiz me after school if she remembered. Then quickly turned around and told her that I would talk to her later, that I was just checking. And somehow I managed to resist the impulse to ask if she, my country, is sure.